I encourage parents that I talk to all the time to, you know, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, because we're not getting this time back with the kids. This time will leave, right? They're going to be 18. They're going to go on. They're going to do their things. They're going to be developed humans. And once they become developed humans, they'll always be, you'll always be a part of their life, but it's going to look different. This is the only time we get to actively participate in the shaping of who they could become, right? Yeah. Before other things influence, and rightfully so, the kind of person that they'll become. And so at this particular juncture, when it comes to morality, when it comes to faith, when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexual orientation, I'm trying to give the kids an opportunity to be as innocent as possible for as long as possible. That's my goal. If it looks like a bubble, I don't give a shit.
Now, Rogers, welcome to San Juan.
Thank you so much.
Well, Matt, I'm super excited you and Ellen came down here, as a matter of fact. It's been a long time. Well, actually, we saw each other at Pest World, but that really wasn't a...
That didn't count. You trapped me.
And you got to meet the Mexican at Pest World.
That's true. I totally met him, and he left an impression, and I'll never forget it. Yeah.
So
searing memory.
So you and I met, I'm trying to think, was it in 2017? I think it was.
17, yeah. We met in 2017, right when my dad was, he had already met you prior, I think, but something kind of happened in the company, and he was ready to make the transition to sell the company, which is not like in the cards for me and Andrew. It was not in the cards at all. So
I want to talk about that for a second. So that's true. I met your old man, and then I remember coming down to Charlotte, flew in from Switzerland. I had dinner with y'all. Yeah. And you and your brother were actually working.
I had no idea what to expect.
No?
No.
What did you expect?
I was like, who is this guy and what is he doing? And I don't know what's happening right now.
Well, how did your old man tell you that he was going to sell the, like?
It's so from the seller side, especially without having the kind of merger and acquisition knowledge that we have now, it's super like startling, and everything's brand new, right? And so he would describe you as like a broker, right? Someone who's going to help us go through this process together. But it was, at the time, it was both a process that we weren't, as a family, like all on the same page about, and it was also just everything was new, and we just had tons of questions. I remember that dinner being like full of questions.
You and your brother, though, were working in the family business. Did you expect that at some point Mike would go off and do whatever?
No, we thought that we were going to inherit the company. That was the plan. Like we had brought both of our wives into the fold. I think Katie was helping out with accounts payable and accounts receivable, and Amy was doing admin stuff downstairs, and Andrew was doing ops, and I was doing marketing, and we had like gotten all of the family in. We had family commercials, everybody around town kind of knew all the stuff, and so that was the plan. We were not thinking that way at all until, I mean, you know what happened, right?
I don't know.
Can I say?
Let's talk.
Well, Dad had always had a trepidation about like the legalization of marijuana.
I remember that.
And that was always kind of working in the back of his mind a little bit. He'd bring it up a lot. How do we go through the processes of making clients feel comfortable and trust a company when you could totally have a high technician moving in and out of their house? But it turned out we had it was a little bit worse than that. I remember showing up at work on a Monday morning, and my brother and a bunch of like branch managers and division managers were like hanging out in the warehouse, and they were all huddled around this cell phone. And I walk over and I was like, what are you guys doing? Stop. Everybody get to work. Dad's gonna be here. Do you know what I mean? And they were watching this video on YouTube. I was like, get everybody, just please get to work. And but my brother was like completely fascinated. I was like, what am I looking at?
I think I have an idea what he may have been looking at.
But we had it was not during like office hours. It was on the weekend. We had an employee, this was during the time of the opioid epidemic. We had an employee who had a back surgery and had unfortunately become addicted.
Yeah.
And so there was a video, it's still on YouTube, of somebody swerving all up and down 601 for like ever. This driver behind him was just watching him. At the very end of the video, he goes over this bank and like pulls this Dukes of Hazzard, and the car is like upside down against a tree. And I remember that being probably the heavier catalyst of Dad being like, okay, like I don't know if we can sustain going forward like this. How do you pay to insure something as it grows to a particular size, right? And so that was, but I believe that was probably the bigger catalyst to kind of project us down another path. And that's how we met you at dinner.
I remember him always talking about, I've got 165 vehicles on the road 24/7.
We had 165 vehicles on the road traveling 60,000 miles a week. That's 2.5 clips around the earth.
2 clicks around the earth every day.
Yes, the earth, exactly.
Yep, that's exactly the shtick.
So how did you and Andrew react to this when he said, hey, I'm thinking about selling this?
We had different reactions. Thank you. At the beginning, I was like, wait, we just brought, oh, yeah.
Cheers.
Friendship. Yeah, hair from the dog that bit you. I had trepidation at the beginning, but then once I understood that this is the direction that Dad was going in, and knowing how unmovable he can be once he set his mind to something, I was like, well, all we can do now is make it as successful as possible. So Andrew, I think, held on a little bit longer and kind of pushed back a little bit, because he grew up in the company, right? Like I was the brother that went to college, and Dad loves to say, I told him no 9 times before I told him yes on the 10th time, right? So I didn't have the type of emotional, I mean, it was emotional, but it wasn't as strong as Andrew's, you know? So he was much more connected to the process, the dream of where he thought we were going, you know? But eventually, kind of towards the end, I think he was just as ready to go, you know? Once Dad gets his mindset to something, there's no moving him.
You were, I guess, the different son, so to speak. I mean, your brother's Ricky Bobby.
Yep.
He's into the cars.
I love Ricky Bobby.
He's racing stuff. Like, your dad's, of course, a huge car guy.
Yep.
You went off and you were a teacher.
I'm built different. I was a teacher for a while. I was a pastor for a little bit. I was a pastor, then a teacher. And I was a graphic designer by vocation. And I basically did nonprofit work. I was working in the nonprofit sector, like NGOs and churches around town, and different nonprofits in the area, trying to help them get some visibility. And Killingsworth was the first time that I used what I was learning from a marketing perspective and kind of catapulted me forward into working in the for-profit sector. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that I think about and kind of looking back is Dad's commitment to always supporting his marketing efforts, whatever they were.
Yep. I
don't just mean digital, I mean billboards, vehicle wraps, commercials, media buying, all the stuff, which is where I learned how to do all the things that I know how to do, right? That's what made all of the difference. We were growing in times where it didn't make sense to grow, and it was because he was committed to that. And so it was great. I had so many tools at my disposal, things that I'd only kind of learned about from afar that I actually got to put my hands on. So it was crazy.
Your main focus at Killingsworth was the advertising and marketing.
Yeah.
Are you responsible for the green color and the pink logo?
No, I inherited all that. So Dad was disinclined to rebrand, right? In his mind, he really did believe the consumer will lose familiarity. And in some respects, that's true. But then you think of companies like Starbucks or Coca-Cola, or you think of like a kinetic logo like Nike.
Yep.
Sometimes it's not even the word. Sometimes they just put a new pattern over the swoosh, but you know exactly what you're dealing with, you know? So we always had this like tension between us of let's go forward. No, this is fine. Let's go forward. And so I inherited those colors. And I inherited the logo, and until we sold the company. In fact, I think it's still the same. I think
they did.
I did a rebrand for them.
Yeah.
And they loved it, but they never pushed it through. So at least while I was there. So yeah, I inherited those. I kind of modified it subtly. Oh, Dad's gonna see this. I took it from the original green that I inherited. And slowly over time, I'd switch the Pantone to make it a little bit more like of Kelly green is where we kind of landed at the end, which has much more versatility.
But he's colorblind, right?
He is. So he's 100% colorblind.
It made your job a little easier.
It just it did for sure. And so that was nice. Dad, don't kill me. I did it real slow. It was like over the course of several years. So yeah, it was a process. It was always like this good tension between the two of us too, because I didn't know much about traditional marketing until I started working with him, and I was helping Killingsworth move forward in the respects of digital marketing. So it was great. The tension and the connection to family and talking about our family just really openly with people made people relate to us, and it totally worked. It was crazy.
Your father was kind of that old school yellow page sales guy.
Yes.
He liked the billboards. He liked TV commercials.
Yeah.
He liked the yellow pages.
He did.
You guys in the early years weren't doing a whole lot of digital stuff.
That's true. That's very true.
And so how did you focus on that over the years?
When I started, I'm sure he'll correct me, but when I started, I remember looking at the marketing budget for a year and something like $300,000 being allocated to yellow page advertising. To be fair, we had 9 services, so we had to be in lots of different sections, right? Mm-hmm. And we had all these coded numbers, and it was like you needed like this legend to understand what's coming in from this. But slowly, as like the world changed, I remember in that time, this is like around 2012, and the rise and fall of things like Angie's List and Yelp and all these different things, and kind of when Dad made the connection that Google is like the new Yellow Pages, that's when he started to trust me more in taking marketing funds and turning it over to Google. And quite frankly, you know, to everybody, you know, who's out there on some spectrum of business, when you feel like you're making it up as you go, I was making it up. I was watching YouTube tutorials, and I was asking friends that I knew in marketing and doing all the research that I could, but I was 100% making so much of it up sometimes, you know. I remember one time in particular, Dad showed up at a meeting and somebody had sent him a picture of like hundreds and hundreds of yellow pages in this dumpster and outside of this dumpster. And I just remember him being like, what the fuck am I even doing this? And I was like, wow. So that was I remember that being a pretty big moment as well, for sure. So yeah.
So after the transaction, Ricky Bobby, of course, embraced his operational role.
Yeah, he loves it.
You did marketing and advertising.
I did for Anticimex for a couple of years, and I loved it. In truth, the marketing team for Anticimex, so talented. And what was great was not feeling by myself. So much in like a family business, when you're growing it up, you get this feeling that you're just very much alone, you know, and that you do have to figure these things out, like as you go. But it was so nice to talk to other people who were learning different things and could teach me different things, and I could ask different questions. And I was actually surprised at the things that I knew that I could help them with. I was like, oh, you didn't know that? Well, I guess I didn't either. So it was great to be connected with people up and down. I still touch base with Stacy from Turner from time to time, actually. And Jason, I think Jason's at Viking. But Yeah, it was. It was like learning. It cranked everything up to 11 for sure, especially in terms of what I was learning about digital marketing. Because obviously in the States, Anticimex is heavily reliant on digital marketing to kind of push the line, especially when they're trying to protect their bottom line. So,
Yeah. Well, I think in a lot of ways they're more focused on digital than they would be like traditional analog stuff like billboards and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you did that for a couple of years. Then you, if I remember correctly, you started your own business.
I did. I started an LLC doing kind of what I do now, right? But I was definitely missing a piece of the puzzle while I was doing it. One thing that I struggled with in the PCO industry was networking. I was not great at it. I kind of took Dad always struggled to network as well in the industry, right? And so I never really saw it like as a priority. So it became kind of a disadvantage for me when I was starting out on my own, trying to solicit my services to PCOs, right? Mm-hmm. I just didn't have the connections. I hadn't put in the time or whatever. Also, Katie was working on her Airbnb business, my wife, and trying to support her, trying to raise 3 kids. We adopted during the pandemic. That was insane. Yeah. So it was a crazy like couple of years. Do you want me to tell the story about where we are like now? Is that appropriate?
Absolutely.
Okay. When both Katie and I were self-employed, health insurance is lousy, right? Our family had just grown by one person. I need to make sure everybody's got adequate coverage, and we didn't know much about my youngest son's needs, his health needs. So I was like, I have to start thinking differently about how I'm doing this. So I actually ended up starting to work for Aruza for a little bit, which is how I learned about Alan. Because I didn't network, I just didn't know anybody. Yeah. I worked with Aruza for like 6 months before I was able to finally partner up with Alan, and then the rest is kind of lighter fluid. It's been insane.
So I remember you were doing some work for Aruza.
Yep.
You met Alan.
Yeah.
You guys now run what's called Lizard.
Yeah. We do. Another inherited company that Alan was gracious enough to let me rebrand.
Yep.
And it's been such a ride working with. I mean, it is completely. We don't have an office anywhere, so our only like infrastructure is our daily meetings, right? Mm-hmm. But working with people with different skill sets to do what I was doing for Killingsworth for other people is fantastic. And I think the thing that compels me in this is not just the fact that I want to grow a business. I mean, I come from entrepreneurs, right? A lot of people don't know this, but Dad's mom was an entrepreneur. And sometimes Dad's dad was an entrepreneur. Not a great one, but his mom.
But one nonetheless.
Yeah. His mom was a great one. So it kind of moves down. So it's not just growing a business that's like compelling to me and watching it grow, this thing that you're like pouring yourself into. But I 100% remember what it was like when Killingsworth was nothing and we were broke. Do you know what I mean? I remember Debbie and Dad taking us to Quincy's on Tuesdays because kids ate free at the buffet. You know what I mean? And we always got like extra plates. And I remember egg salad sandwiches, so many egg salad sandwiches because it's cheap. Do you know what I mean? And I remember buying our clothes at Value Village. And so I remember where some of these companies are at the beginning, and I have so much respect for it because I don't know, you dream about where your future is going to take you and what might happen down the road. But some of these like PCOs, I can help them visualize and articulate, hey, this is for real. Do you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I know it's hard. I know it sucks. Sometimes I know you might be screaming when you've got to get the bats out of an attic and embarrass yourself in front of clients. I know all of those things, but if you stick with it, something great can happen at the end. And getting to partner with lots of Mike and Debbie Rogers at different phases of their journeys it's been awesome.
How are you dealing with running this business and being a father simultaneously?
Well, Alan would probably say that I could step away just a little bit. I'm trying, but I'm kind of addicted right now. I am doing better. I have hard cutoffs at the end of my day.
Do you?
And I've got a great team in place. It's covering my back, and they all feel the same way. But I mean, when you're starting something up, you're just dumping yourself into it because you love it, right? I'm sure that there's going to be a time when the honeymoon's over, and I'm like, oh my God, if I hear the word lizard one more time, I'm going to jump off a building.
But you seem super stoked. I mean,
I'm super stoked.
When did you start?
We just celebrated our first year in October, but I have been at the helm for 9 months now.
Yeah, I mean, ever since you've started, you've been super giddy about what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And you're experiencing.
It was
very
the catalyst. That networking piece was the missing link between the startup that I had, which was a miss. It was a miss, and the startup that we're doing, which is a win. It's working.
You know, to your point on your father didn't network much in the industry, I respect that about him, because your father always said, I'm going to network outside of the industry, and I'm going to look at what companies outside of pest control are doing.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
I get that about him.
Yeah. And it was an advantage for him as a PCO because he was the big fish in a lot of rooms.
And he wasn't selling other PCO. Yeah, exactly.
But it was a disadvantage to me when I was the small fish in a lot of rooms. And all of a sudden, I was like, oh, shoot, I probably should have gone to like more. I could have participated more or sat around at more dinner tables or shared a glass or something with somebody. You were my only pest control friend.
That's true.
Andrew knew everybody.
That's all you
Andrew
need.
is way better
you just
at
need
it.
One good
I just
pest
need Paul.
control friend. That's it.
So Andrew's good at that stuff. I was just never great at it.
So what are the ages of the children now? It's been a while since I've seen them.
I know. Elliot just turned 13. Leo just turned 11, and KJ is 10. So they are all starting to get stinky and moody. They're wanting like expensive toys. And it's so much fun. We're traveling together, our first big family adventure next weekend, which I'm super stoked about. And it's great. We're entering just like a new phase as a family, new phases for business. It's crazy.
So let's talk a little bit about this planned vacation.
Yeah.
So you guys are going to Ethiopia?
We're going to Ethiopia. Our best friends run an NGO out of Ethiopia. They help with the homeless population of kids, get them either reintegrated back into their families' homes or into a group home. They'll do like 4 kids with a house mom, and the NGO funds the living for the home and the house mom. And so they're building all these little micro economies everywhere. They do like make leather goods, and they have a salon and all this kind of stuff. They do a CrossFit. They have a CrossFit gym out there. They're trying to build little economies everywhere to support this infrastructure that's going. They got a staff of 52 now. It's crazy too, because they were a little startup at one point. They lived in a little house in Charlotte, and they were just helping like kids on the street, and they've turned it into this in Ethiopia because they adopted their daughter there. So she's at UNCC. We're flying back with her. We'll spend 5 days working with them, and then as a collective, the Post family and the Rogers family will be heading to Egypt for 5 days, which your wife was kind enough to give me all the Egypt pointers, the do's and don'ts.
Did she give you good pointers?
Oh, she did. Plus, I got her number now. I'm going to pester the hell out of her next week. Good. So don't be mad.
So when you're in Ethiopia, is this hard labor then for you guys, or what?
It will. I mean, it will be not for me or Katie. I mean, Katie spent a lot of time like in the mission field, but it will be for the kids. I mean, I've got some first world connected little kids, you know. So this will be good for them. We're hoping to kind of help them disassociate with what they see when they're in the States and what goes on in many other like places in the world. And if we're hoping if that embeds in them young, it'll keep like this just healthy perspective. That's one thing Debbie and Dad had that I always loved about them both is like humility. They weren't afraid to be humble because that's what they came from, right? So I'm at a disadvantage with my kids. I got to teach them to be humble because they're not humble sometimes.
How's school this year?
Oh man. All right. So I was a teacher. So there's context here, right? Back when I was refusing to work in the family business, I probably frustrated my dad even further by saying, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go make $28,000 a year as a school teacher.
Damn
Take that, Mike.
Why on earth would you do that, boy?
Especially the school I picked. But I was a school teacher and I loved it. So before my current situation, and I'd say this if Alan weren't here, it's my favorite job. Right? I had my favorite boss. It's when I learned the most about team building and what you could do if the organism was pulling in the right direction. I loved it. I had 120 kids per semester, okay? 36 kids per class, 3 classes a day, 8 A/B day schedule, 120 kids a semester, and I loved it. was drinking from the fire hydrant. Anyway, still very different. I've got a middle schooler and 2 fifth graders. And last year, I've started a homeschool in response to a lot of the troubles that I'm having with the new culture of the school system. One of the things that my older son struggled with is he was being made fun of about his faith by his teacher in a classroom conversation that happened last year. And I was very much Mike Rogers in that conversation as well. And then this year, my daughter and my son were being asked to go through a assignment where this is without the kind of the knowledge of parents or consent of parents. And they were having to write down very complicated and nuanced questions that adults have trouble articulating, to be fair. They're asking them questions. They had to write it down on this card, questions about their sexual orientation, questions about their...
Like a fifth grader's sexual orientation?
Yeah, fifth graders, 10-year-olds. My daughter was 10 at the time. And so they're asking them these questions and they're putting down on paper and then they present it to the class, right? So this is an involved assignment that took multiple days, right? That was planned. I have it on my phone. And my daughter tried to go to the restroom because I'm very upfront with them. It's one of those things, Paul, like you hear about it, that these things are happening in the school systems. And then when it happens to your kid, you're like, what is happening right now?
Yep.
We are living in a strange time. And so Leona's trying to go to the restroom. She's texting me because she wanted to try to get away from the assignment. And the teacher wouldn't let her go. So I was like, do not be afraid of your teacher. Do not answer those questions. Daddy's going to be there in 3 minutes. And I was there for 2 solid days with the principal, the assistant principal, and the teacher at different kind of combinations of those points. And I was channeling Mike Rogers. All of it. Like I was looking for him in every cell.
Did you have a bracelet? What would Mike Rogers do?
WWMRD. I'm gonna make one. But I was there. It was crazy because Debbie, my mom, everybody was like, tell me where to be. Everybody was just riled up and ready to go.
So what did you do? I mean, so you rolled into the school.
I lost my damn mind. I wasn't thinking clearly at the beginning, but then my mind started to, your senses start to come back when you see less red.
Yep.
And so I was first flabbergasted that they would even ask these questions to developmentally inappropriate times, like 10, right? Yeah. My daughter wants to be like a Sailor Scout. She's all into Sailor Moon right now. And KJ's just finding his basketball superheroes that he wants to grow up and be, right?
Yeah.
But then I was repulsed by the school's dismissal of my concern. And that's kind of what lit the fire of the rest of the 4-letter words. Mm-hmm. The principal is very understanding, to his credit. The assistant principal, I hope you're watching. Not so much. And the teacher, she barely said anything the entire time, hardly replied back to my communication. And it's such a different time, Paul, because when I was a teacher, I was beholden to all 120 of my students' parents. When one of them started to struggle in class, we had to show up. We had to lead, just like we're leading conversations with our partners, we had to lead the conversation then. Hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up, this is happening, right? Yeah. That when we sent syllabuses home that had to be signed, And so it's not like that. It's not like that. It makes me sound like an old fart, but it's not like that anymore. And so I started a homeschool, which is called Rogers Fucking Amazing Homeschool. And it is, in fact, fucking amazing.
And when you applied for that, how did you come up with that name?
I was pissed. I was pissed off because of who I'm married to. And not wanting to dishonor my wife. It is an acronym, so it's RFAHS. Okay. Right? But I remember she didn't believe that I was going through this process, and the paperwork came back from the state. She was sleeping. We don't wake Katie when she's sleeping. Baby, I hope you're watching. We don't wake Katie when she's sleeping. We let her have her sleepy time. But I was so excited when I got the paperwork back from the state. I went into the room and I'm shaking this piece of paper over my head. We're a homeschool. Yeah, we got this. We got a number and everything. She sat straight up in bed and she goes, did you really put the F word in the title? I was like, oh,
Yes, you
it's
did.
in there.
Yeah, you did.
It's in there. She's like, you really did that? And I was like, yes. She goes, our son is going to graduate from
Rogers
fucking amazing homeschool. And I was like, yep, he's going to do it. It's going to be on his diploma. I'm going to make t-shirts. It's going to be great. Harvard's going to be like, yeah, I want that kid. So I don't know, man. It's a different time. Elliot's doing great. He's the first student of Rogers fucking amazing homeschool. The littles, I call them the littles.
Did he giggle when he applied?
No, he loved it. I mean, the kids know who I am at this point. So they're like, oh yeah, of course he did that, Mom. Why wouldn't he do that?
But I guess there's no gender orientation assignments for 10-year-olds.
There's not.
At Rogers amazing fucking homeschool.
There's not. The thing is, one of the things that really got me kind of in my feels about the whole situation is my youngest son, the adopted son, has experienced, like, we were talking about, he's experienced some pretty incredible traumas. And nobody at that school was qualified to have very deep conversations about morality, identity, gender, sexual orientation with a 10-year-old, much less a 10-year-old that has received so much trauma in his life.
Yep.
And so to think that he, without me knowing, might have had to stand up and articulate very complicated and nuanced ideas to a classroom and then recite these things over himself, right? Over and over again. He'll remember that time forever going forward is wildly inappropriate. So the two other ones will be joining Rogers fucking amazing homeschool in January is the plan. I'll have a class of 3. I'm running a business and running a homeschool. It's great though. Elliot's lowest grade. He was struggling to kind of articulate his focus in this type of setting at this particular school. And his lowest grade right now is like a 93. He's reading books all day. We don't do screens at the house. So we'll do screens on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday after church, right? But Monday through Thursday, you can build something, you can read something, you can do something, but you got to do those things. And so he's cracking through some novels and, building crazy structures and thinking about stuff, and we're going places, and I'll work at a coffee shop and he'll be working from his little Chromebook across from me, and he kind of loves it. He'll always remember this, and I will too. It's definitely been a ride.
What about when the other parents, they've got their children in miserable fucking public school?
Yeah, miserable fucking public school.
What happens when they realize that this Rogers school exists?
It's available.
Would you take on
no.
other?
Our max capacity is 3. The truth is, I think we're living in a weird time where parents are having to take more ownership of this. And if you look back in history, parents were much more involved than they are right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trust right now when it comes to taking your kids and being like, here, stranger, teach them things.
Yeah.
And so there used to be more engagement, I feel like, from the parent level. And I think that because of where our culture's at, parents feel really quieted and they don't feel like their voice is going to be heard. And so I encourage parents that I talk to all the time to, roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, because we're not getting this time back with the kids. This time will leave, right? They're going to be 18. They're going to go on. They're going to do their things. They're going to be developed humans. And once they become developed humans, you'll always be a part of their life, but it's going to look different. This is the only time we get to actively participate in the shaping of who they could become, right?
Yeah.
Before other things, influence, and rightfully so, the kind of person that they'll become. And so at this particular juncture, when it comes to morality, when it comes to faith, when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexual orientation, I'm trying to give the kids an opportunity to be as innocent as possible for as long as possible. That's my goal. If it looks like a bubble, I don't give a shit. Not anymore. I did when I was younger, and I was like, no, man, I don't want my kid to live in a bubble. We're going to be out there. But then when you get the kids, you're like, no, I'm putting them in a bubble. 100% shoving their shit in a bubble. It's going to be great, guys. Get in the bubble.
But this whole homeschooling thing seems to be a trend. I mean, Jill and I were having dinner the other night. We were talking about, my brother-in-law lives in Charlotte Metro.
Yeah.
And he's talking about pulling his 2 boys.
It surprises me that, because he's in Concord. And
Correct.
So Concord's like a more rural part of town, right?
Yeah.
I hate that word. But that's where he's
where he
at,
is,
you know?
yeah.
And so you would think that they would be more inclined to be a little bit more conservative than they are, but it's like everywhere, and you've got to choose. I'm either gonna be constantly get this PTSD with dodging these landmines. The other piece I would encourage, you know, anybody's listening about, if you're finding yourself in this spot, is you've also got to lead those conversations in your household as well, right? You've got to be having the conversations about sex, drugs, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. You can't leave that to strangers. Do you know what I mean? To somebody's going to teach them, and it probably should be you, you know? And so at the same time that they're living in this bubble, we're doing the extra credit of, okay, let's talk about this. It does make it easier to have boys and girls in the household when it comes to the sex stuff, but it's still pretty funny.
So what do you talk to the kids about with
We talk
sex,
to them
drugs,
about
rock and roll?
everything.
So,
yeah.
For example,
especially the part of town that we live in is like, it's so stinky with pot sometimes. So we'll be walking, like doing a family walk around Cordelia Park, and be like, guys, that's skunky pot. That's not the good kind.
That's not even the good kind.
You don't want, in the future, you're not going to want that kind. You want, this is the one. But even in terms of like sex, you know, that was another kind of complicated part of the process. You know, my daughter, she's becoming a young woman. Do you know what I'm saying? She's got to have spaces where it's, A, she can talk about these things that's going on with her, but B, where she can deal with these things with like a monicum of privacy. And that's not always available these days, and that's hard. But it is available at Roger's Fucking Amazing Homeschool. So
priority number one.
Yeah, priority number one. So yeah, we have the conversations with them, and we never make them feel uncomfortable or embarrassed about needing to kind of talk through something, you know. We don't shy away from them. We don't use words like birds and bees and you know, shit like that.
Does Katie deal more with your daughter and you deal with the sons?
So Elliot, he looks like me, but he got his mother's temperament. Leona is she looks like Katie. She's got my temperament.
I remember her. She was real sassy.
She's so sassy. It's the best because we have the best fights and the best hangout times.
Yeah.
It's so good. And then KJ obviously doesn't look like either one of us.
No, he does not.
But yeah, the interesting thing about it, especially before we launched this really amazing homeschool, is the pandemic actually kind of helped kind of set the stage, right? Yeah. Everybody's having to homeschool basically anyway. Yeah. And at a time where our family grew by one 6-year-old, we were all concentrated in each other's proximity in this home. You know, nobody could go out, couldn't go do anything. So we're having to make up ways to entertain each other, play, fight, reconcile, all that stuff. So it kind of was an advantage, not a disadvantage, you know?
So I met KJ, your adopted son, when Dylan, I, and Fat Pat came out to Charlotte. We spent the weekend at your parents' house.
I can't call him Fat Pat. He's not fat.
Well, Fat Pat is a state of mind, according to the Mexican,
it is a state of mind.
as you well know. So it has nothing to do.
So good.
So, and by the way, like as we were talking about at dinner last night, like Fat Pat was never fat. Like it was just, I was just having fun with it. But that he's subsequently gone to the gym. He's been hitting it heavy,
Hit it,
as
Fat
you know.
Pat.
Yeah. Hit it, Fat Pat. So we met KJ when we were out there, right?
Yeah.
We went to the car show, had a great time.
Yeah.
Great kid.
Yeah.
Very happy, just fun-loving kid. What was that like adopting? He's black, you're white, you live in Charlotte.
Yeah.
He comes from a family that, you know, his mother has had lots of problems.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
So I was talking to your wife about this last night. I love your wife. So that's another part of the conversation that we have to lead, right? It's only in the culture that we're at right now, I think people's real biggest struggle is they're not talking to each other. And so, especially when it comes to like raising a black son, we want to be super honest about the fact that we are white and that he is not, but that doesn't make us not family, right? And I also want to be super honest about the kinds of things he'll experience because he's black and the kinds of things that Elliot will experience because he's white. I don't want to shy away from those things either. And so I think the thing that makes him feel comfortable is he knows that Katie and I are going to move into his spaces and we don't care that the spaces don't look the same, right? Yeah. And so what's made him, hopefully, I hope we're doing it right. I hope he doesn't have like a trauma counselor.
a Rogers trauma counselor.
Rogers, maybe it'll be a counselor I can hire at Rogers Fucking Amazing Homeschool. If anybody's out there, we need a counselor. We need a counselor. But I think that's one of the things that's helping him acclimate. He's allowed to talk about it and not feel like it's not something we can talk about. That's one of our things our culture's missing, right? We just need to talk to each other more, not less, right? And we need to listen to each other better, not less, you know? So I think when you can kind of try to strike that balance or at least work in that direction, you'd be surprised how things kind of mellow out, you know?
You know, when we came back from dinner last night, we were driving home, my wife was like, I almost teared up when Matt was talking about, you know, some of the issues that they face when they're out in public, for example. You're a white family,
Yep.
You have a black son.
Yep. So at the beginning, this is kind of one of the, you got to plow through it type of things. But at the beginning, I'm not sure if I'm doing this right. For people that's watching, please.
Yeah, I know this is your first time. You tend to learn on the fly. Like you're Googling stuff probably watching
comment
YouTube.
down below.
These are not suggestions.
What the pandemic handed us was an opportunity to feel normal. We were doing normal family things, playing Family Friday every Friday,
Yeah.
making pizzas, watching movies, popping popcorn, doing laundry, farting on each other, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
But when the world started to open up and we'd start to go out in public, everything would be normal. I mean, he's 6, you know? So he'd be holding my hand, we'd cross the street, swinging, skipping, talking, whatever. But then when a black family would approach, I would feel his hand like weaken in my hand and he'd try to like slip it away,
Yeah.
you know? And that tells you something about the way our conscious and our subconscious mind interact with complicated issues like race, right?
Yeah.
He's 6. He doesn't know enough. He hasn't lived long enough of a life to make, black people are coming, that's not what he's thinking. It's just happening, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember we were walking into this barbecue restaurant. I'm pretty sure I didn't do this right, but it's what I was feeling, so I just kind of went with it. We were walking into this barbecue restaurant. He's swinging and happy. We're talking about whatever. He loves barbecue. He's a little carnivore. So this family comes out. They're walking towards us, and I can feel his hand start to loosen up in my hand. And I gripped his hand tight. I got right down, and I was like, I love you. I don't care who's looking. I'm not letting go of your hand. And his eyes just got like real big and like soupy with water.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I broke him. We kind of moseyed over to the side, and I was like, you know, it's okay, but I'm not going to let go of your hand when black people are around. That's something that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. And so I think having those upfront kind of conversations help, you know, help ease the tension. Ever since then, he hasn't had a single problem with it.
And I noticed live and in person, Mike and Debbie have taken a real liking to that kid too.
It was really interesting to watch my family react and respond to this big change in all of our lives, right? I knew Debbie was going to like throw her arms wide open, and that's exactly what she did. She did just like she was raised with her dad and her mom, which did the exact same thing to Kadrien. And I knew it was going to be like a challenge for Dad, mostly because these kinds of decisions I feel like that I've made in my life have always just been a little difficult for Dad to grasp. He always gets to a better place on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking the first time that we took KJ up there, I was like, okay, you know, when we talk to Papa and Gigi, we make eye contact, we give big hugs because we're respectful, right?
Yeah.
That's what this house culture is like. And I remember throwing up a couple prayers like, oh Lord, please let this go well between Dad and KJ. Come on. And so I would look over there and Dad would be showing him some of his cars on his phone.
Yeah.
I would look back over there and Dad would be talking to him about something. He'd be sitting on Dad's lap. And then right when we were about to leave, they gave each other like the biggest hug. And I was like, okay, we're through the challenging parts of this. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But it's only when you take intentional steps. I think that's the funny thing about race. You've got to take intentional steps because it doesn't happen naturally, right? We're all inclined to kind of find our groups and stick with our groups, right? But unfortunately, in the case with Kadrien, he got us. his presence gives us all outside of our comfort zone. We have to think about these things in a different way. And everybody in the family pitched in and showed up big ways. You know, Andrew, his wife Amy, it was crazy. So those are one of the things that help. Everybody's got to be kind of committed to it to make it work, you know.
It's great watching you guys. You guys really have
It's a mess under the hood.
Like
we just wash the car a lot, but it's a mess under the hood.
I remember the first time I met your daughter, we were sitting on the porch of the house that you had bought, but we could not enter.
That's right.
Because I think it was under contract, right? Like
that Paul was gonna.
I remember we buy we went out to dinner. I think then we came back, we bought wine, and we literally, it was in the evening. We sat on the porch. Your kids were there. Your daughter was talking all sorts of trash. Like she was angry, talking all sorts of trash. Your son was relaxed, calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah, not paying any mind to anybody.
No.
That's his MO.
Yeah.
But yeah, the vibe is good. We're a work in progress, though. That's for sure. I don't want to paint too rosy a picture. I'm the volatile, emotional parent. Katie's cool, even Steven, solving all the problems, and the kids. They're all different spectrums of that, for sure.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you and Alan coming down here, and we'll have a little chat with Alan later today.
Yes. Super excited. Thank you so much for having me, dude.
Absolutely.
This is great.
This is great seeing you.
All right, how'd I do? Yeah.